Disney's Aladdin was released on both the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo in November of 1993, about a year after the film debuted in theaters. Unlike most Disney platformers of the era, these two games were developed by completely different companies, and are essentially completely different games. Aladdin for the Sega Genesis was developed by Virgin Games. At the time, the studio housed talent like David Perry and Tommy Tallarico. They, along with the rest of the studio, would develop a reputation for producing high-quality games for the aging Genesis. Aladdin for the Super Nintendo was developed by Capcom. These folks had already cemented their legacy for producing great Disney platformers, with games like DuckTales on the NES being particularly excellent. So, it seems like a no-brainer that Capcom also secured the rights for a game based on the immensely popular film. Aladdin on the Genesis very much feels like Virgin Interactive's earlier efforts in both structure and design. Levels go up and down, left and right, making the stages feel a lot bigger than they actually are. Also, like other Virgin games, the camera feels like it's on an elastic band, and the screen bounces all over the place when you change directions or jump. This contrasts with Capcom's efforts. Aladdin on the Super Nintendo is much more linear. Levels typically move left to right, and the screen only moves up and down if the level has vertical features. As a whole, I find the levels in this game to be a lot less confusing, and appreciate the more straightforward approach. More different than the level design are the gameplay mechanics. In Capcom's Aladdin, our hero feels more agile, matching some of the cinematic moments from the film. Many stages have you swinging off bars and vaulting off poles. Aladdin will even grab onto ledges and pull himself up, which fits perfectly with the game's heavy platforming. Not only that, there is a dedicated run button, which again aids in the platforming. Virgin's Aladdin is a lot more straightforward. Aladdin doesn't have any tricky maneuvers, features just one speed, and can jump. Aladdin's jump will differ depending on his position on a platform. If he is on the edge of a platform, he will leap farther. If he's not near the edge, his jump is more limited. This can be awkward at times, and you'll experience some deaths as Aladdin misses a landing. Still, even with this minor annoyance, I prefer it over Capcom's swinging and vaulting approach. What most people talk about when comparing the two games is the combat. In the Genesis game, Aladdin has a sword and can slice up foes. He also has a long-range attack in the form of apples. I found myself using the sword more as a shield for incoming projectiles than as a weapon, however. There are plenty of apples to collect, and it's much safer to use these to defeat enemies than engage in close-range combat. Capcom's Aladdin forgoes the sword altogether. Rumors have always persisted that Nintendo thought the sword was too violent and had it removed, but I think this is more internet folklore than fact. Aladdin also has apples in the game, but they can only be used to stun enemies. You must jump on them to finish them off. Honestly, the combat in both feels just fine, and I don't prefer one over the other. As the audio hardware in the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo is completely different, the games sound nothing alike. The SNES soundtrack is fairly strong. It's clear Capcom knew their way around the system because the tracks sound full and detailed. The instrument selection is great and the compositions are memorable. I just wish they would have used more melodies from the film. Virgin's Aladdin very much sounds like a Sega Genesis game. Overall, it is a bit simplistic and hollow, however, the compositions are fairly strong. Virgin actually utilized most of the songs from the film, and you'll recognize Arabian Nights, One Jump Ahead, Friend Like Me, Prince Ali, and A Whole New World. These are classic Disney songs, and hearing them rendered on the Genesis brings me right back to my childhood. Both games do feature Friend Like Me, so let's take a listen to both renditions. The Super Nintendo version is clearly better. I just wish Capcom had included the rest of the soundtrack. As is, I prefer the Genesis soundtrack overall. Of course, you can't compare a Genesis and SNES game without talking about the graphics. Again, both systems feature very different architecture, lending each system to have its own look when it comes to their respective game libraries. Capcom's Aladdin is beautiful, with sprites featuring a ton of detail in both design and subtle shading effects. There is also the occasional transparent cloud, which is something the Genesis cannot do. A couple stages also have quite a few background layers, which isn't something you often see on the platform. Virgin's Aladdin doesn't quite match up to Capcom's efforts. It's clear the designers were a bit stymied by the limited color count available with the Genesis hardware. As a whole, the sprite work lacks the detail found in the SNES game. Where Virgin's Aladdin surpasses the SNES version is in the animations. Aladdin himself moves with a beautiful fluidity on the Genesis. In fact, he just might be the best looking human character on any Genesis game, period. Sega and Virgin were able to utilize the talents of Disney animators, and it really shows. Everything from running, jumping, and climbing looks superb. The SNES version still features nice animations, but Aladdin looks more like a video game character and less like an animated star. Both games do share many of the same environments, so let's take a look at them side by side. The cinematic sequence of Aladdin finding the lamp in the Cave of Wonders is in both versions. However, the SNES version looks superior with transparent lighting. Of course, both games also feature Agrabah. Again, the SNES version looks superior with more detailed buildings and backgrounds. Aladdin and Abu escaping the Cave of Wonders on a magic carpet is a pretty awesome sequence in the film. Both games feature a level based on this moment, and I give my nod to the Genesis version. While neither level is very fun, Virgin was able to create some of their own blast processing, and the level flies by incredibly fast. As a whole, I don't prefer one game over the other. The SNES version looks nicer in screenshots, but Aladdin himself looks considerably better in the Genesis version. Overall, I feel the Sega Genesis Aladdin is the better game. It certainly has its problems and isn't a graphical showpiece for the system by any stretch. The fact that Aladdin jumps farther at the edge of a platform is totally unnecessary and bizarre. Other issues include some spotty collision detection, especially in the prison level. I have no idea why Aladdin keeps falling through this platform, but it's aggravating. However, I find it more enjoyable than the gymnastics in Capcom's Aladdin. The game is littered with bottomless pits causing instant deaths. I don't enjoy the vaulting mechanic either, and the later levels just require too much precision for this awkward mechanic. There's also Knockback, which seems a bit dated for a 1993 release. I find Virgin's Aladdin to be a lot more enjoyable to play. Every time I pick it up, I play it to the very end. It's an engaging experience from start to finish. With Capcom's Aladdin, I'm reaching for the power button halfway through. Still, both are good games in their own right. Aladdin is easily one of my favorite movies from my childhood, and I'm more than satisfied that two completely different games are available to help me relive those memories.